Coach Sarah Mitchell blew her whistle at exactly 4:15 p.m., cutting through the chatter of 12-year-old soccer players who were sprawled across the muddy field like casualties after another grueling practice. The parents standing along the sideline fence wore expressions that mixed concern with barely concealed anger. Their designer coffee cups clutched like weapons as they watched the 38-year-old Afghanistan veteran demand push-ups from kids who'd missed passes during scrimmage. 3 mothers had already approached the Millfield Youth Soccer League president about Sarah's inappropriate military-style training methods. And now the emergency parent meeting scheduled for tonight would decide whether she kept her job. "Water break," Sarah called out, ignoring the pointed stares from the sideline gallery. 2 minutes, then we're running wind sprints. Tommy Rodriguez, the smallest kid on the team, raised his hand tentatively. "Coach Sarah, my mom says we practice too hard. She says it's just recreational soccer." Sarah looked at the 11 kids sitting in the grass, their faces flushed and sweaty but alert in a way that reminded her of young soldiers who'd learned to focus when everything depended on getting it right. She'd been coaching the Millfield Mustangs for 6 months, ever since her medical discharge from the Army. And she'd watched these kids transform from a collection of individuals into something resembling a team. "Tommy, what's the difference between practicing hard and practicing scared?" "I don't know, Coach." "When you practice hard, you get better. When you practice scared, you stay the same." She looked around at the circle of young faces. "Which one do you want to be?" "Better," the kids said in unison, a response that had become automatic after months of Sarah's relentless emphasis on improvement over comfort. Behind the fence, Ashley Hartwell, president of the parent-teacher organization and mother of the team's star player, was taking notes on her phone with the focused intensity of someone building a legal case. The emergency meeting was held in the elementary school cafeteria, where folding tables and plastic chairs had been arranged in rows, facing a podium that looked more suited for a tribunal than a discussion about children's sports. 23 parents sat in judgment while Sarah stood at the back of the room, still wearing her coaching clothes and wondering how trying to teach kids soccer had turned into a battle for her professional survival. League President Bob Morrison called the meeting to order, with the grim efficiency of a man who'd handled similar conversations before. "We're here to discuss concerns about Coach Mitchell's training methods and their appropriateness for recreational youth soccer." Ashley Hartwell was the first to speak, reading from prepared notes with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting her way in community organizations. "Mr. Morrison, we've documented multiple instances of Coach Mitchell subjecting our children to inappropriate physical demands. Running laps as punishment, requiring push-ups for missed plays, shouting instructions in what I can only describe as a military manner." She paused for effect, looking around the room at the nodding heads of parents who'd apparently reached consensus before the meeting even started. "Our children come home exhausted, sometimes in tears. This is supposed to be fun, recreational soccer, not boot camp." Sarah waited for Morrison to ask for her response, but he seemed more interested in managing the complaints than hearing both sides of the story. "Coach Mitchell," Morrison said without much enthusiasm, "would you like to address these concerns?" Sarah stood up, noting how 23 pairs of eyes tracked her movement with the kind of suspicious attention usually reserved for people who didn't belong in polite society. "I've been coaching these kids for 6 months. In that time, they've won 12 games, lost 3, and learned to play as a team instead of 11 individuals chasing a ball around a field." "That's exactly the problem," interrupted Jennifer Walsh, whose son Tyler was the team's goalkeeper. "You're treating this like a military operation instead of children's sports." "Mrs. Walsh, what exactly is wrong with teaching kids discipline, teamwork, and the importance of preparation?" "Nothing, if it's age-appropriate. But making 12-year-olds do push-ups when they miss a pass, That's not coaching, that's punishment. Sarah looked around the room, seeing faces that reflected the comfortable suburban assumption that children should be protected from any experience that might be challenging or uncomfortable. Mrs. Walsh, when Tyler saves a goal in a real game, does he feel proud of himself? Of course. Why do you think that is? Because he worked hard to stop the other team. Exactly. And how do you think he learned to work hard when it mattered? The room was quiet for a moment before Ashley Hartwell spoke up again. Coach Mitchell, we appreciate your service to our country, but this isn't Afghanistan. These are children playing a game. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. The casual dismissal of her military experience, the assumption that skills learned in combat had no place in civilian life. The implication that she couldn't distinguish between training soldiers and coaching kids. Mrs. Hartwell, you're right. This isn't Afghanistan. But these kids are still learning lessons that will matter for the rest of their lives. Such as? That success requires effort. That teamwork means supporting each other when things get difficult. That leadership means taking responsibility instead of making excuses. Morrison cleared his throat. Coach Mitchell, the parents have raised valid concerns about your methods. Perhaps we could discuss modifications to your training approach? Sarah understood what was happening. The polite language, the diplomatic suggestions, the careful avoidance of direct confrontation. It was the same bureaucratic dance she'd encountered in the Army, when commanders wanted to get rid of someone without taking responsibility for the decision. Mr. Morrison, what specifically would you like me to change? Well, perhaps less physical conditioning, more emphasis on fun and participation rather than winning. And less shouting, Ashley Hartwell added. Children respond better to positive encouragement. Sarah looked around the room at parents who seemed genuinely convinced that they were protecting their children from something harmful. So, you want me to coach a soccer team without physical training, competitive spirit, or clear communication? We want you to coach children, not soldiers, Jennifer Walsh said. The difference being, children are supposed to enjoy sports. They're not supposed to be afraid of their coach. The first surprise came the next morning when Sarah arrived at the soccer field to find 12 kids already there, kicking balls around and running laps without being told. Tommy Rodriguez, the smallest kid on the team, was leading warm-up exercises with the kind of serious concentration usually reserved for much older athletes. Coach Sarah, called out Marcus Williams, the team captain whose mother had been notably absent from the previous night's meeting. We heard about the meeting. Are you really going to stop coaching us? Sarah set down her equipment bag and looked at the kids who'd shown up for practice despite not knowing if there would be a practice to attend. That depends on a lot of things, Marcus. Your parents have concerns about how I coach. What kind of concerns? Asked Emma Santos, whose father had served 2 tours in Iraq before opening a small auto repair shop. They think I'm too hard on you, that I make you work too much and don't let you have enough fun. The kids exchanged glances with the kind of wordless communication that teams develop when they've learned to trust each other. Coach, Tommy said quietly, can I ask you something? Sure. My dad says you were in the Army, in Afghanistan. That's right. Did soldiers die there? Sarah hesitated, unsure how much honesty was appropriate when talking to 12-year-olds about war. Yes, Tommy. Some soldiers died. Were any of them from here? From Millfield? Sarah felt her throat tighten. Yes, one of them was... The second surprise came that afternoon when Marcus Williams knocked on Sarah's apartment door, accompanied by his mother Janet, a nurse who worked at the regional medical center. "Coach Mitchell, I wanted to apologize for missing last night's meeting," Janet said. "I was working a double shift at the hospital." "It's okay, Mrs. Williams, I understand." "Actually, it's not okay, because if I'd been there, I would have told those parents something they needed to hear." Janet looked tired in the way that healthcare workers do after years of dealing with real problems, and she had the kind of direct manner that comes from not having time for unnecessary politeness. "My husband served in Afghanistan. Marcus's father. He was killed by an IED in 2019. Sarah felt something shift in her understanding of the conversation. "Mrs. Williams, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Most people don't. We don't talk about it much. But Marcus knows his father died serving his country, and he knows what that means." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "When Marcus started playing soccer for you, it was the first time since his father died that he came home excited about something. He talks about teamwork, about not letting his teammates down, about working hard for something bigger than himself." Marcus, who'd been standing quietly beside his mother, finally spoke up. "Coach Sarah, the other kids don't understand, but I do. You're teaching us the same things my dad learned in the Army." "What things, Marcus?" "That you have to take care of your team. That when things get hard, you don't quit. That sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do because other people are counting on you." Janet Williams looked at Sarah with the kind of understanding that passes between people who've both lost something important. "Coach Mitchell, there's something else you should know. The tournament next month? The one the league is talking about canceling because the parents think it's too competitive." "What about it?" "It's the Staff Sergeant David Williams Memorial Tournament, named after my husband. It's for teams that want to honor military families by playing their best, not just participating." The third surprise came during the team's next practice, when Sarah discovered that the kids had been talking to each other about the parent meeting and had reached their own conclusions about what needed to happen. "Coach," Emma Santos said during water break, "we want to do something." "What kind of something?" "We want to show our parents that we're not just playing soccer. We want to show them what you've been teaching us." "And how do you plan to do that?" Marcus Williams stepped forward, holding a folder full of handwritten notes. "We wrote letters to all our parents, explaining what we've learned from you." Sarah opened the folder and read the first letter, written in Tommy Rodriguez's careful cursive. "Dear Mom and Dad, Coach Sarah doesn't yell at us because she's mean. She yells because in soccer, like in the Army, you have to communicate clearly when things are important. When she makes us do push-ups for missing passes, it's not punishment. It's so we remember that our teammates are counting on us to do our job. Coach Sarah teaches us that being part of a team means something." The fourth surprise came that evening when Sarah's phone rang and the caller ID showed Bob Morrison's number. "Coach Mitchell, I've been getting calls all day from parents who received letters from their children. I hope they weren't inappropriate, Mr. Morrison. Actually, they were quite remarkable. I've also received 3 calls from military families in the area who heard about the controversy and wanted to express their support for your coaching methods." Sarah waited, unsure where the conversation was heading. "Coach Mitchell, I owe you an apology. I should have asked more questions before scheduling that emergency meeting. It seems there's more to this situation than I understood." "What do you mean?" "I mean that perhaps some of us forgot that discipline and high standards aren't the same thing as abuse, and that maybe our children are more resilient than we give them credit for." The final surprise came on the morning of the Staff Sergeant David Williams Memorial Tournament, when Sarah arrived at the soccer complex to find not just her team warming up, but also Janet Williams standing beside a memorial display that honored local military families who'd lost loved ones in service. "Coach Sarah," Marcus called out, "come see this." The display included photographs of Staff Sergeant Williams in uniform, along with photos from his deployment and letters he'd written home to his family. But what caught Sarah's attention was a newer addition. A team photo of the Millfield Mustangs with a handwritten note from Marcus. "This is for you, Dad. Coach Sarah taught us what you tried to teach me before you left. That being on a team means something." Ashley Hartwell appeared beside the memorial, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Coach Mitchell, I owe you an explanation and an apology." Sarah turned to face the woman who'd led the campaign to have her fired. "Mrs. Hartwell, you don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do. I've been talking to other parents, reading the letters our children wrote. I realize I misunderstood what you were trying to accomplish." She paused, clearly struggling with words that didn't come easily. "My father served in Vietnam. He came home different, and our family never really talked about what that meant. When I saw you using military-style training with children, I thought you were trying to turn them into soldiers. And now I understand that you were trying to turn them into a team. There's a difference." The tournament lasted all day, with 8 teams competing for a trophy that honored the memory of a soldier who died serving his country. The Millfield Mustangs played with the kind of focused intensity that comes from months of disciplined preparation. But more importantly, they played for each other. When Tommy Rodriguez scored the winning goal in the championship game, his teammates didn't just celebrate. They helped him up, reminded him to thank the opposing goalkeeper, and jogged back to their positions as a unit. In the stands, parents who'd questioned Sarah's methods 6 weeks earlier watched their children demonstrate the kind of character that develops when young people are taught that excellence requires effort and that being part of something bigger than yourself is worth the sacrifice. After the game, as the team gathered around the memorial display for pictures, Marcus Williams approached Sarah with something in his hand. "Coach, this was my dad's. My mom said I should give it to you." He handed her a military challenge coin, worn smooth from handling, with the 173rd Airborne Brigade insignia on one side and the words "Honor, Courage, Commitment" on the other. "Marcus, I can't take this. It belonged to your father. He would have wanted you to have it, because you understand what it means." Sarah looked around at the kids who'd learned to trust her guidance, the parents who'd learned to trust her judgment, and the community that had learned to value the lessons that military service could teach about teamwork, discipline, and mutual support. She thought about the long journey from Afghanistan to a youth soccer field in Ohio, about the challenge of translating military values into civilian contexts, about the resistance she'd faced from people who couldn't see the difference between demanding excellence and causing harm. Janet Williams approached with the championship trophy, which would be displayed in the memorial case alongside her husband's military honors. "Coach Mitchell, David would have been proud of what you've accomplished with these kids." "Mrs. Williams, I just tried to teach them what someone once taught me. That being part of a team means looking out for each other." As the families packed up their chairs and coolers, Sarah watched her players help clean up the field without being asked, working together with the same focused efficiency they'd learned during months of demanding practices. The Staff Sergeant David Williams Memorial Tournament had been about more than soccer. It had been about honoring the memory of a soldier who died serving his country by teaching his son and his teammates the values that military service represents: duty, honor, sacrifice, and the understanding that some things are worth working hard to achieve.